The supreme, profound, and sublime Dharma is difficult to encounter even in a billion eons, but now I have been fortunate enough to have seen it, heard it, received it, and kept it. I vow to attain the true meaning of the Tathagata. In order to liberate all sentient beings, let us generate the supreme bodhicitta.
Nyamda gendam choshenar narma pogda mepa top rapshon de la lohtava nganson ne sing iberton stomba jarne tsanyang de drbi den tsiklua met rati chenach chopadang khtangi ranglin tagblaye skajik tsamda jerdang rapshon namlar modmavsha khchakung barwa zubai kane mechim chedulai Structure mopi tsig da corruption namla nimavsha. Rater nombe ranliki, lutsig sharpak chudlai, shivlur dondog sharmoki, gerlon namla nimavsha. Lagbe mugni pjinen karmang longwar kirulai, chagpir shup gangzagla, logbi muk tamavsha. Gondang da kam shigbadang, ranchim churtin chaglai, stsimunsik gendan larkara da pramavshawu. Shurtin shigbe rang tong ne kara khagmer dungmaramyo gendan kyonmi nibai changmet semjen namkyang tong dinam kepe lakshat te gendan mo pramavsha ngak nipa lakchong na tsarnchir yinman judmavsha ngak nipa lakchong ne tsarnchir yinman judmavsha tsitsib ngak gebjong mot nyari dungmar zotmet myong Tarne mili topkirikyang, gonlong kikbanyatangir, jiktin lunmong gaji ki pzimbab zimmar kyun jope, ngansong nesa longne na fkarmang dinghuram tsorabshang. Fzechin tomba niki kyang gendan namla gipshak zat, sangrje namkyang te irtar na sosu kiewur muchin tsar. Jiktin tardan mangbo ye rafshong kirjang tadnayang, te yi kyundag Tubatse loktar kiner ponrashid. Dina Ricardan Gertsan Jum Rafshon deyang lagbrashid. Ricardan Sandir Tomamjer Dinam Kepe Tabrasha. 我们讲那个战胜
Now let's begin the class on Sutra on praising the noble qualities of the Sangha.
这个今天呢就也是
It is indeed also a very auspicious opportunity today. I think during the process of studying, you probably also felt that if you were to have heard of this sutra before, then maybe you would have created less negative karma for yourself. Now that we have this opportunity to listen to this sutra is in fact quite necessary. Because without such opportunities, without listening to this sutra, we won't be able to know what kind of actions to adapt and what kind of actions to eliminate. Therefore, we really need to learn to have more wisdom in our practice. According to Jigme Rinpoche's text, Yishe Lama, in the preliminary, the preface part of the Yishe Lama, there was a preliminary practice on right mindfulness, and within that it says that if one do not practice diligently, it is indeed very foolish for that person. So I think now we've already gained a human body that is difficult to gain. If we were to squander this precious human body by not practicing, not listening, the Buddha Dharma and not observe precept, it is in fact quite a pity, very regrettable. So now we've already got this human body. We've already encountered a spiritual teacher that is difficult to encounter. We've already encountered the correct Dharma that is difficult to encounter. We have all the favorable conditions with us, and therefore I really think we should cherish the time, cherish the opportunities. Even if you listen to one class a day, I think it would make your life very meaningful. Sometimes maybe you don't understand the sutra because your mind is distracted, or maybe you have some affliction going on in your mind. In fact, if you were to listen to one class with a pure intention, I think you should understand at least a part of it. Even if you don't understand anything at all, at least there's the preliminary aspiration, there's the merit at the end, the dedication of merit, and all of these kind of merit that is accumulated is in fact inconceivable as well. So I really hope that you consistently listen and contemplate the Dharma, and I really hope that you have that enthusiasm and do not let that enthusiasm fade. And there are people who were very enthusiastic at the beginning, but slowly that enthusiasm fade, and then without tasting the flavor of the genuine Dharma yet, there are people who would give up because of the fading of their enthusiasm, and that is quite a pity. So that's the first thing I would like to address. And then the second thing is that in our practice, I think it is quite important to rely on a main teacher, a root teacher. In fact, to have such a teacher is quite important. The previous masters, such as Toga Rinpoche as well as Khenpo Gompo Rinpoche, they emphasized on that point. You can supplicate, you can ask questions to this teacher if you have questions, or if you have a main teacher in terms of your in terms of precept, in terms of bodhicitta, or if you have a few root teacher in the Tantrayana studies, that's fine too. Because just like driving or learning any kind of skills in this world, we need a mentor. So that is why it's important to rely on a teacher. That is something that we can see, but there is something that we cannot see we should rely on as well. That is a deity. You need to supplicate to a deity at all times. I think there are different types of deities as well. For example, in order to have wisdom, you should supplicate to Manjushri. To have compassion, you should supplicate to Avalokiteshvara. To dispel obstacles, you should supplicate to Tara and Pamasambhava. Therefore, this kind of consistent supplication could dispel obstacles and loss of faith. This is quite important. The third aspect I want to address today is that we've already begun our studying and contemplation for the second half of the year. I see that people are very interested in studying, I think mainly because of the COVID-19 and many things that happened before. Therefore, people generated more intention to listen and contemplate the Dharma. And this is really important. As Buddhists, I think during the COVID-19 lockdown, the practitioners really have some they really have some things to do, and they have their own faith to rely on to. But for the non-practitioners without faith, they spend that time with lots of boredom. Through impermanence, I think people had more faith, but faith alone is not enough. We really need to study the teachings such as five treatises and Tantrayana teachings mainly very diligently. A few years ago, I spent lots of time and energy in the Dharma activities, such as propagating the Dharma, and many wonderful practitioners who were very good at studying and very good at tutoring and so on, they all conjoined in that aspect of propagation of Dharma. And this year, I think because we had to put down those things, and I think it's a wonderful opportunity for you to refocus your energy onto studying and contemplation again. Therefore, I really encourage you not to waste your time anymore. Otherwise, if you were still in the kind of habitual pattern you used to conduct your life and not able to come back or refocus on your studying again, I think it is rather quite a shame. I understand that there are lots of you who, in fact, are quite eager to liberate sentient beings and guide sentient beings onto the path of liberation. But if you don't have a fundamental understanding, if you don't have the basis, the firm basis of the Dharma, then you go into the world and start propagating the Dharma and guide people. I think at that time it would be difficult to say if you were there to guide the sentient beings or the beings are guiding you to other paths. So now let's get into the actual class. Now let's look at the 17th stanza where it says that for the ones who want to constantly have enjoyment and happiness, then one should constantly make offering to the bhikshu, to the Sangha. Do not differentiate the disciples of the Tathagata with the inferior mind of a mundane being. Over here it says that if one want to have happiness, want to have that those happiness in different areas, such as beautiful appearance, such as abundant wealth, such as health, such as social status, and so on. And for the kind of happiness that is the dharmic happiness, such as the fruition of Shravaka and Pratika Buddha, this kind of dharmic bliss or transcendent bliss, and then one should make offering to the monastics, especially bhikshus and novices and so on, so that all of these merits will become the causes of happiness. I know that some of you probably won't be able to make such offering, but at least do not use the inferior mind of the mundane beings, such as arrogance, jealousy, flattery, and great bias, and so on. You should not make differentiation of the disciples of the Tathagata with the inferior bias, because all the Sangha, all the disciples, especially the monastic group, are all the disciples of the Tathagata. Therefore, you should not try to make dualistic differentiation with your inferior mind or with your own dualistic mind. Do not think that this person doesn't look good. The other person is rather poor, therefore I'm not going to make offering. And if you were to make such kind of differentiation, is in fact not really good for you, as it is stated in the Vinaya Sutra. Prince. Some said it's Javaka Prince. When he wanted to make offering to the Sangha, he admired all the other Sangha members. However, he didn't really want to make offering to Tulapantaka, because Tulapantaka is known for his slowness and he's really stupid. So at that time, Javaka didn't want to invite him, but he wanted to invite everyone else. The Buddha then wanted to demonstrate to all the Sangha members and everyone about Tulapantaka's realization. Therefore, when Ananda was supposed to retrieve the bowl after the meal offering, Buddha didn't give back the bowl to him. Instead, Tulapantaka, since he already attained fruition and he understood the secret meaning of the Buddha of not giving his bowl back to Ananda, and then Sulapantaka then reached out his hand, that is as long as the nose, the trunk of the elephant, and then retrieved the Buddha's bowl back. Upon seeing this, Javaka thought that who is this bhikshu has such magnificent power, could extend his arm this long. And then when he tried to find out who it was, he found out that it was Sulapantaka that he looked down at earlier. And then he felt quite ashamed of himself, felt that he shouldn't have discriminated him earlier, and he then made his confession. So from this story, we can see that there are people who may look slow and stupid like Sulapantaka, but their inner realization may already surpass our dualistic mind. In the Sutra of Wise and Fool, there was once a donor, a benefactor, that was Javaka prince, and he invited the Sangha to enjoy offering and make offering to the Sangha, but he didn't want to make offering to the group of Sangha, the bhikshus who used to be beggars. Therefore, he only invited the ones who were not beggars. And then the Buddha told all the bhikshus who used to be beggars, many of whom already attained arhatfication, and asked them to go to Uttarakuru to receive the delicious food that is the naturally ripened grain. And then Buddha, along with the group of Sangha that's invited by Javaka, went to the palace first, and then after the group of bhikshu who went to Uttarakuru, that is the North Continent, they, after received the naturally ripened rice, they came back to the palace as well. Upon seeing this, Javaka felt regretted for his previous action. I think many people nowadays would judge others based on their appearance. Many of them, not many of them, would pay attention to the inner dignity that is the precept, samadhi, and wisdom. Some may not appear so dignified on the outside, but maybe their inner wisdom and samadhi and precept are quite significant. For the ones, in fact, the mundane beings can barely see what other people's mind stream is like, and therefore the mundane beings shouldn't make such discrimination. Just as in the stories of the Buddha, in fact, even the great arhats, in fact, nowadays we probably don't have the arhats who can demonstrate this kind of miraculous powers, but the merit of wearing monastic robe is in fact inconceivable still. So we shouldn't discriminate the monastics based on their appearance, especially if you're a lay practitioner. Do not make such kind of discriminations. Do not see the disciples of the Tathagata with the inferior mind of the mundane being. Then it says the benefactor with pure faith, for even 10 instants, make offering to the Sangha with equanimity will receive immeasurable merit.
他这样的，如果有这个亲近的这个心
Over here it says that if one has this pure mind, the benefactors, let it be women or men, if they can develop this faith, a pure faith towards the Sangha, towards the monastics, even for one instant, even for a short moment, as short as 10 thoughts or as short as 1 instant, in a very short period of time, if one can generate such faith, such as going to a pure privilege site, a pure pilgrimage site, or going to a monastery, or a short moment of having faith towards the Sangha. Even 10 minutes, 10 seconds, such short period of time, if that person makes offering to the Sangha, to the novice, with such kind of short, very temporary faith, with a sense of equanimity, instead of making biased choices. I know that nowadays people have this habit. Some people only want to make offering to the bhikshu monastics. There are people who want to only make offering to the older bhikshus, the ones who want to make offering to the monastic who observe the pure precepts. I don't think it's necessary to make such kind of discernment. People would say that they only want to make monastics who are 6 years older, and there are the ones who only want to make offering to the young novice because they're more adorable, and there are the ones who only want to make offering to the bhikshus or the bhikshunis and not the bhikshunis. So I think because everyone's mind is very different, their faith is different. However, we should really make offering with a sense of equanimity. As long as they wear the monastic robes, we should then make offering with a sense of great equanimity. In such a way, then people can receive the immeasurable merit. In the Mahaparinirvana Sutra, it says that there are people who, after getting ordained, after shaving off their hair and wear the robe, they still haven't received the 10 precepts of novice. So for the ones who received the precepts or not received the precepts, they should still be able to enjoy the offerings that's made to the Sangha. So that's the point made in the Mahaparinirvana Sutra. Even if the ones they have not received the precepts, but as long as they are within the Sangha, they can still receive the offerings. They can still accept the offerings made to the Sangha. I think nowadays there are not many people within the Sangha who are younger than 18 years. But before, there are Sangha members, the monastics who are 18 years or less. Can they still use the money, or can they still use the offerings that's made to the Grand Sangha? Maybe they only shaved off their hair, they haven't received the precepts yet. In fact, they are already part of the Sangha, so it is definitely reasonable for them to accept the offering. It is, in fact, not about how old you are, it is not about where you're from, it is not about you received the precepts or not. So when we make offering, we shouldn't make such kind of discrimination either. You should use a pure mind to make offering.
就是平等啊，就是用平等的这样的供养的话呢，要获得了这个无量无边
over here it
的功
talks
德
about
无量无边的功
to make
德
offering with a
就是
sense of
我们短暂的
equanimity
信心
which
其实
will
有些
lead
人
to
经常讲
immeasurable
我
merit.
什
Even
么
if you have
就
a
是以
very
前很有信
short
心的，但最近呢就是心性退逝啊，就是
a
就
very
自己好
short
像觉得
faith
是特别
that
惭愧啊，
probably
很
sparked
伤心啊，这
for
样
an instant.
其实作为凡
Just
夫人的话
as
呢，
nowadays people
除
would
了
say that I
个
used
别
to
的
be
一些
very
前
faithful,
世
I have
的
lots of devotions,
因
but
缘极
recently
其
I've
殊
lost
胜
that
的
kind
人
of
以外呢，
devotion.
就
And then
这
they
种
would
心
feel
性特
quite
别稳定
ashamed
的
of themselves
就
and
是
feel really
这种人
upset.
就禅
But
定
I
特别
think
稳
as
定的话呢
mundane
不
beings,
是那么容易
unless
哪怕是
you
短暂的
have
时间当中有过信
accumulated
心的话
great
呢
merit
那
from
你用
previous
这
life
个
and
信
you
心
have
呢
very
你可以
supreme
做一些善
connections
事
to the
念
Dharma,
经也好然后过
those
一
kind
段
of
时间
people
我
would
们作为
have
凡夫
rather
人可能
stable
暂时
faith
看
and
来是
stable
呢
samadhi
烦
and
恼
so
啊
on.
就
But
是也
this
会
is
有
not
的
easy, it's
但
not
是再
common
过一
either.
段时间呢
Therefore,
就
I
有可
think
能
for
会再
mundane
次
beings,
信
if
任
we
所
have
以
even
凡
a
夫的一般的
momentary
这个心
faith,
态
then
的
we
话
should
呢
use that
就像这
momentary
个夏季
faith
的这种天气一
to
样就是
practice
12这个
virtuous
善
deeds.
事而
Let it
就
be
这是
chant
一个正常
mantra
现
and
象
so
所
on.
以自己这
But
个
later on, maybe
心
you will
就
have
是
afflictions
这
again.
种
But
善
that's
念的时
okay.
候呢
Just
也不
like
要
how
就是过于的
in
开心
how the
啊
weather
我
in
修行太
summer
好了我真正的
has
自己只是参生
sometimes
信心
cloudy,
和清净
sometimes
心以外
rainy.
没有任何的
For
恶念
mundane
我
beings,
现在好像
sometimes
是不
it's
是获得了
virtuous,
阿罗
sometimes
汉
it's
果位
not.
置
This
也
is
不要
just
这么
really
这样
normal.
的不然
So
明天就是因为
whenever
恶
our
的事
mind
情呢
has
你可
this
能会爆发力
virtuous
气啊有可
thoughts,
能的
don't get
然后有时候
overjoyed
是
by
参
it
生
and
嗔恨
think
心
that
就是
oh,
可
have
能妈妈觉
wonderful
得
practice.
一些
And
那
after
个
2
道友
days,
啊
you
就
would
这样的
feel
话
that
自己觉得是
you
我太失
you
败了
would
就是完
have
蛋了一切的一
lots
切
of
我再也没有
anger
什么
and
希望
started
也不用怎么想明天也许是可
probably
能
scorn
雨
the
过天晴
others
就
and
是
so
一切
on
都
and
是
would
这
feel
个
that I
山
am a
鸟之下
failure,
有可
I
能
am
所以
completely
凡夫人的
over
这种心态呢就是
and
会有变化的
this
正
kind
因
of
为这样的
negative
话呢就
thoughts.
是他说三人三女
Don't
能
do
于失眠
that
当中产生
because
信心
just
供养
like
的话
how
呢也是功德无
the
量的
weather
并没有说
would
是
be
你
raining
长期
today
性
and
的
maybe
啊
sunny
就是
tomorrow,
就是什么
everything
常
is
年
in
如一日
fact
或者说是恒常不变的信心来
everything
供养并没有
could
这么
be
做所以我们有信心的时候呢自己
good
也
for
应
your
该
practice.
就像
So
入信人里面所说的
don't
就是黑
worry
夜
if
当
your
中的
mind
闪电一样的
changes.
就是这个
Don't
这种这
worry
个
too
善
much
心呢
about
就是不
if
是那么
your
容易
mind
的
changes.
一旦有的时候呢就是这也是诸佛菩萨和上师们的加持应该自己做一些善
In
事哪
fact,
怕是听一节课的话呢也是非常非常好啊就是非常好
The the virtuous mind
接
is
下来
not
呢
easy
就
to
是这样
generate,
的
and
什么
just
就是如意
like
僧
it
众
is
器
stated
械
in
间
the
当来印度三
Bodhisattva
恶
Charyavatara,
道
it
十尊
says
亲子
that
以
just
干
as
云
how
行可
the
奉炫
flashlights,
成不枉
just
啊
like
就是
how
说
the
如果
lightning
对这个
flashes
僧啊
at
就是出家人
at
当中的这
the
个
dark
僧人呢
night.
就是产
That's
生这
how
个谢见啊
short
他的这个
our
行为也好他的见
virtuous
解也好
thought
他的
occurs.
相貌也好
So
凡是指着
number
以种种
19 it
因
says that
缘的话呢就是对
generating
他产
wrong
生
view
这个
within the Sangha
谢
will
见
lead
当然
to
这个僧
3
众的
lower
话呢就是
realms.
在僧人
World
当中的个
honored
别人
one
或者是很多人
taught
就是
on
对
this
他们
with
产生
his
谢见的话呢
melodious
那这个
speech.
果报是非常可怕的就是未
That
来
is
的
to
话呢
say,
一定会是堕入这个
if
地狱恶鬼
you were
唐
to
僧
have
当中啊
wrong
这是
views,
很可怕的啊就是
let it be the
就
wrong
是
view
非常
about
这
the
个可怕
Sangha
的就
or
是那么
have
就是他一定会是堕
discriminating
入什么
view
呢就是这个
about
地狱恶鬼唐
how
僧
they
当中的
look.
就是以前那
All
个本
these
师
kind
经
of
当中
wrong
是这样
views.
子的邪见黑就是害愚妇
Many people, after generating such wrong
啊
views,
就是说
in fact,
这个邪
would
见的话呢就是会
have
这
to
个伤害
suffer
我
from
们的这个愚
the
笨的这些这个
grave
犯妇人啊
negative
就是
consequences from it,
他呢就
maybe
像
fall
是
in
这个
or
像
be
祸
born
的话呢就
into
是
the
什么
3 lower
方物啊
realms.
就是草木啊
According
就是全
to
部都会造为
Itivyataka
分
Sutra,
散
it says that
同样的
the
就我们的这个一切善根毁
wrong
坏之
views
后的
would
话呢
harm
就让
the
它堕入这个
foolish
恶鬼
ones,
就是
just
堕入
like
这
how
个三恶
fire
趣
would
就干出
burn
无量的痛苦。那
everything.
么这一点的话呢就是实际上是大慈大悲的这个世尊
Just like how the fire would burn house and grass and forest exist and would completely destroy all of them. Similarly, all the virtuous roots, virtuous deeds you've accumulated would be destroyed by wrong view and eventually fall or reborn in the three lower realms and experience the immeasurable suffering. This is taught by the great compassionate Buddha with the 60 melodious voice. In the Diamond Sutra, it says that the Tathagata is the one who speaks of things as they are, speaks what is the truth, and speaks in accord with reality. In fact, everything could change in our world, but Buddha's Vajra words and Vajra speech will not change. He knows the causes and duration of all phenomena. So if one has a wrong view and slanders the Sangha, will definitely be born in the lower realms. This is taught by the Buddha in different sutras. Therefore, we have to watch out for our own mind. Whenever you see something that you don't really disagree or you think is unreasonable, not proper, then at least try not to slander it and try your best to make a confession. This is quite important because this is Buddha's speech, Buddha's Vajra speech. It won't lie to you. And the next part is through different metaphors talking about one would rather suffer from all various kinds of suffering in this world, but should avoid at all costs to slander the Sangha. The first one, it says that one should rather cut off his tongue with a sharp knife or smash one's body with a pounder. That those kinds of actions are better than slandering the pure Sangha with aggression. Cutting off our tongue with a sharp knife or using a pounder, the tool that we use to pounder medicine into granules. If we were to use those kind of tools to pound our body, in fact, just by thinking about it is horrifying. There are many different teachings in the talking about the hell realm. In fact, it's quite horrifying to listen to or to imagine. Thinking about cutting our tongue with a sharp knife is, in fact, quite scary, and putting our body in a large container and pound it with a pounder, this is really unimaginable. But if we were to destroy the body for this lifetime, it won't be destroyed for lifetimes. So destroying this body for one lifetime is in fact not that severe. But if you were to slander the Buddha's Sangha, that is the pure Sangha, that kind of slandering and aggression is more horrifying than destroying the body for this lifetime. If the ones that you slander are the monastics or the acharyas or the bodhisattvas, if you were to slander or scorn with affliction with the great aggression, the result would be indeed very terrifying. In the Dharmapada Sutra, it says that there was once a lay practitioner when there was once an ordained monk. When he was in the womb of his mother's body smelled really disgusting. It smells like a feces and urine. When he was born, he carried that smell around him, and everyone really didn't like him at all. On top of that, he really liked to eat feces and urine. So many bhikshus really dislike him. But through his practice, he slowly then attained the fruition. Later on, many disciples then asked the Buddha, saying that what happened to him? Then the Buddha said that he used to be an abbot at a monastery, and at the time he slandered and scorned some people and said that, oh, you should eat the feces. And then later on, that person who he slandered attained arhathood, and then although he made confession at the time, but in the 500 years, he reborn as ugly he reborn as people with ugly appearance or smell or has this stinky smell because he slandered others with aggression. So whenever we have aggression, we would use dirty language to slander others, such as you're such an animal, is so stupid, and things like such. In fact, this is quite horrifying because it could lead to dire results. Whenever we are in front of someone who is of greater merits, such as the Sangha and so on, you should try your best to practice patience, even if you practice for 5-10 minutes, and then the aggression could disappear. And once the aggression disappears, even if once the discretion disappears, it is very rare that you would still slander others with a foul language. So this is something that we need to pay attention to. Of course, we understand it from theory, but whenever we encounter things like such, as mundane beings, it is indeed very difficult to control our own mind. If our mind is not under control, then the action could go wild as well. So in our mind, we must have a very steady determination. Whatever things we encounter later on, we must control our own mind. In fact, it is difficult to not generate even a single bit of aggression, but with this aggression, if we were to carry out actions of slandering others, that result would be really dire. So this is that verse is about this. And then the next verse, the 21st, it says that rather swallowing scorching iron ball or let fire burning in the mouth, one shall not use even one word to slander the pure Sangha. That is the monastic. In our life, just thinking about swallowing an extremely large size of iron, scorching iron ball that is the size of the king of the mountain, the Mount Sumeru. If you were to swallow that size of a fireball, then you would be completely burnt. This is quite horrifying to even think about. But you'd rather swallowing a scorching fireball that size or let fire burn in your mouth. It is the best not to. You'd rather to have those things done on you because that could only destroy your body for this lifetime. But if you were to speak ill of the monastics, the suffering could last much, much longer. There are people who would commit self-ammunition, self-burning themselves in fire, which would die in 10 minutes or so. But other than that, you experience pain for only a short period of time. Other than that, it's not going to last you for a long period of time. But if you use the dualistic mind, your deluded mind, to make fun or to speak ill of the monastic, then that result, that fruition could be horrifying. According to a sutra, it says that when the Buddha and Ananda came into the city, and they saw ugly and dirty insect in the feces, and then that insect looks like a person, and that insect is crying at all times. After Ananda and Buddha went back to the Vulture Peak, Ananda asked the Buddha, that insect is so what a poor insect, what kind of cause for his horrible fruition of living like such. And then the Buddha said that at the time when a group of Brahmin was making offering to the Sangha, there was one monastic only cared about his friend monastic, but not the new monastic. Therefore, he only gave the monastics that he knew, not the newcomers. And the newcomers were not happy because the Brahmins made offering to all the Sangha who were there, all the monastics who were there. Therefore, why didn't you share some of those offerings with us? And then that person who became, who were reborn as an insect, at the time started to shout and scorn at them, saying that, who are you to enjoy this offering? Why don't you just enjoy some feces and urine? For that reason, for the many kalpas, he lived in toilets and eat only feces and urine. Therefore, whenever we go to toilet and see those maggots, it is most likely they've made grave mistakes in their previous life, and because of that they were born in feces for lifetimes to suffer in that environment. So think compared to these kinds of results, I think swallowing an iron ball or let fire burn your mouth is terrifying, but not as terrifying as that. In the sutra also it says that it is the best to protect the karma of your own speech, because the karma that it could create is far more dire than have burning fire in your mouth. Therefore, if we create any kinds of this negative karma in our speech, then for lifetimes it would in fact lead to horrifying results, horrifying karmic consequences. Therefore, many times I have to say, including myself, sometimes because I have to deal with the management and many other things, I think I've created negative karma in terms of my speech as well. When Pongsu Rinpoche was teaching on the Sutra of Wise and Fool, Sutra of 100 karma stories, and so on, for a period of time everybody felt quite frightened hearing those stories, and they didn't dare to make up nicknames for others or use foul language to curse others and so on. But I think mundane beings like us, we would get distracted and forget about those. Therefore, let's chant the Vajrasattva mantra together to confess in front of all the Sangha, in front of all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. I think not many people would use foul language and a bad intention to scorn others, but the consequences of karma is in fact quite dire. Therefore, let's make such confession together. Sura karma samitsna sharakar hon ha ho bhagavanam sarada nangataranda madramamimanda Bhava Maha Samaya Sato Aum Banzar Sato Samaya Mana Balayam Banzar Sato Dinovati Jajome Bava Sabo Kayome Basabo Kayome Ba Narodam Sabo Kayome Basura Surdamam Jaza Sura Karma Samitsna sharakar hon ha ho bhagavanam sarada nangataran Banzar Bhava Maha Samaya Sato Aum Banzar Sato Samaya Mana Balayam Banzar Sato Dinovati Jajome Bava Sabo Kayome Basabo Kayome Narodam Basura Surdamam Jaza Sura Karma Samitsna sharakar hon ha ho bhagavanam sarada Gataranda Madramami Manza Madar Bhava Maha Samaya Sato Aum Banzar Sato 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 Banzar Sato
Bandır sadon, 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 bandır Bandır sadon, 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 bandır Bandır sadon, dağdan simçin, tam çiğ, tam söylem, çoğun döne, döne, şançır, nyambu, tam zür, nambır, da, bırışo.
So let's continue. It then says that one would rather to cut off his own limbs and his own skin and muscles, should not laugh at or name-calling the mundane beings. Don't even mention about cursing and slandering the bhikshus. So over here it says that one would rather to use a sharp knife to cut off all the four limbs with great cruelty, both hands and feet, even use sharp knife to completely cut off the muscle and the skin and flesh. In this way, if one were to do such cruel thing to oneself, then it would be very difficult to live afterwards. But if one dies because of this, it is only to lose this life. One would rather to do all of those cruel cutting than name-calling, make fun of, or smirk at mundane beings. Don't even mention about the mundane beings. You should not do those to the monastics, to the bhikshus. And that would be, the consequences of such would be even worse. Again, from the sutra, it says that there was once a Tripitaka. I think this story is also included in the aspiration of reborn in the land of bliss, where it says that this Tripitaka bhikshu has a superior bhikshu, and that bhikshu was quite great. The only shortcoming of him is that his voice is not very melodious to hear. So this bhikshu then started laughing and mocking the other bhikshu, saying that the other bhikshu's voice sounds like dogs, and because of that he was reborn as a dog for 500 lifetimes and experienced great suffering. In this world, we should not use vicious language to even curse or hit the mundane beings. I think over here the mundane beings means the lay practitioners, and we should not do that to lay practitioner, to the animals, and we should not do name callings or create nicknames for others such as shorty, fatty, a blind, deafy, and things like such. These are not favorable names that people like to hear. I think some parents also do that, unfortunately. I have a relative, he has a dozen kids, and he named each one of his kids with some really bad names. He would use animals to name his kids, such as vicious dog and head of a bull and horse mouth and things like that. I don't want to repeat those because it's quite terrifying to say that now. So to your friends, even if you're jokingly making nicknames for them, the consequences could be quite dire. So one would rather cut oneself, but should not treat others with such smirk and call them with vulgar words. Sometimes I see that there are people would spend time to learn how to attack others in their speech. This is really horrible. They would use all different kinds of vulgar language. And in terms of vulgar language, they have great eloquence. There are some government officials I would meet, especially I think people from Sichuan province, they really like to speak dirty words, and even people with high social status, once they speak of this kind of language, right away other people's view towards them will be changed. So we can easily see other people's inner character, if they're cultured, if they're educated or not, or how's their taste. We can see it very clearly. Therefore, it is the best to use the cultured language, the gentle language, the pure language. And if you have some very important things to express very urgently, you should also use gentle language to express it. That's quite important. For monastics, for practitioners, it is quite important to use language with grace. Sometimes, of course, you need to be a little bit more stern, but even if you need to be stern, you need to have right mindfulness to protect yourself. I think this way would be the best. And the next metaphor says that rather to blind one's own eyes and born blind for many kalpas, one should not glare the renunciates or roll their eyes at the renunciates. So you would rather use hands to blind yourself or be born as a blind for many kalpas. If you can't see, it's only in fact suffering for one lifetime, and that's really not that much of suffering. But for people who are renunciates and the kind of people who are long-time practitioners, the monastics, you should not look at them with from the corner of the eye to glare at them. There are people who don't really say it, but if they feel uncomfortable with the other person, they would glare at them. I'm not sure if I'm doing a good imitation.
怎么看？就是不能这样，对吧？好像真的看不出来。凡是不能以这种，我们有时候可能怎么说啊？就是这个表情，就是他的那个
this kind of expression, this kind of facial expression, in fact, this kind of this kind of way of looking at others, especially to the monastics, to the
可能凡夫人只产生烦恼、产生嗔恨心的时候很难对治吧。但是呢，一般来讲就是最好就是个
to the others, I think, of course, it is understandable that it's easy for the mundane beings to have afflictions, and it would be hard to work with the aggression, but we should use the compassionate eye to look at all the sentient beings. Therefore, right now it is wonderful to be born with good eyes, with the eyesights, but even so, if you were to look at others from the corner of their eyes to glare at them, then it would be you might be born with the eyes that is rather abnormal. Nowadays, there's of course the surgery where you can change to prosthetic eyes, but probably not that convenient. It is that, in fact, you can't really see from from your eyes, from that prosthetic eyes. And if you can't see things, it's quite a pity. There are people who don't have good eyesight or who don't have good eyes, they have problems with eyes, and then there are reasons for it. There are people who have who don't have good body postures and so forth, and that's also for some reasons, previous reasons. So those are really part of the karma. There are people who have 3 or 4 kids as a family who are all healthy, but one person's health is not so great in the family, or even handicapped. That is because everyone's karma is very different. And then the 24th, it says that one would rather to destroy and dismantle the practice center and monasteries, to burn down the stupa with the 7 jewels. One would not then speak ill of the Sangha or slander the pure Sangha of the Tathagata. By doing these things, such as destroy the practice center or demolition of the monastery or burning down the stupas and so on, in fact, such kind of consequences quite dire in destroying any monasteries, any of the residence of the Sangha, even if it's made of wood, made of cement, and destroying the monasteries and so on, destroying the Buddha statue and the stupa. The consequences is quite horrifying. But what's more horrifying is to slander the Sangha. Let it be with reason or without, because with such kind of language, people could create more wrong views. And then it further explains, saying that destroying the stupa or destroying the monastery, in fact, such kind of person would then experience suffering in immeasurable kalpas. But for the ones who speaks ill of the Sangha, who speaks the shortcomings of the Sangha, would, on top of that, destroy the others for listening to such language. If one only destroys the stupa and monastery, he would experience dire situation for himself, because that's something he did. But if he were to speak ill of the Sangha, gossip behind them, such kind of language would be known by others, and if known by others, it could make people, it could in fact influence lots of people. So language can be quite terrifying, because the power of it could be passing from 1 to 10 and 10 to 100. Even at the beginning, if a particular person doesn't have any shortcomings to start with, or doesn't have not made any mistakes to start with, but if other people were to say, oh, there's so many complicated issues here, and I think in such way they could then make lots of obstacles for oneself and others. Some lay practitioners, they don't know this, and they would go to monasteries not practicing the monasteries. They don't practice confession, don't practice or listen and contemplation, but they're there to practice gossiping. They would say, oh, so-and-so doesn't get along, so-and-so does not observe precept, and the other person violated precept. It is really because of his own affliction, because he doesn't see anything proper, doesn't see anything good, and started saying those things to others, and other people would also generate such a wrong view and a wrong perception because of that person's untruthful depiction. Nowadays, there are many platforms where people could could say whatever they want. Even there are places that's supposed to be very pure and a good practice center. The Sangha members are very pure as well, but people would slander, and then thousands and millions would do that as well. That's the nature of people. They would follow what other people say. There are people who are more steadfast and their minds are like the mountain, but the majority of people are in fact they don't have such a steady view or steady belief, and therefore they would change their mind based on other people's description. In this way, then they would create a negative karma for themselves and others. So if you don't have a steadfast faith yet, people could tend to slander others, which then lead other people to also be born in the three lower realms. There are many Buddhist practitioners nowadays, and I would give them suggestions, especially the ones who don't have a pure belief. It's the best not to go to the monastery, because even if you go there without a pure belief and without a pure sense of perception, then all you see are the impure things that's happening around you, just like a person with jaundice would perceive the white conch as yellow. So if you have a wrong view, whatever you see would be impure, whatever you see would be wrong, and then you won't be able to gain anything from any practice center. All you can gain is suffering for self and others. All you can gain is talking about mistakes of self and others. So I think if we were to hear other people talking about shortcomings of practitioners and about the practice center, we should practice by covering our ears and not listen to it. That is according to resting your mind at ease. If that thing, however, turn out to be the truth, then you don't necessarily have to closely examine it, because you're not really a supervisor. Then what's the point of doing that? I think nowadays people's words, in fact, have lots of hidden agenda. Even by describing the same thing, if two people have two different agendas within the consequences and the conclusion coming out from the two people's statement would be very different as well. So as practitioners, knowing that life is really short, in this short lifetime we should practice by making aspiration and practice virtuous deeds. But there are people who then got onto the wrong path or with the wrong views. Instead of practicing virtuous, they practiced the unvirtuous. And because of the virtuous dharma, they would fall into the hell realm. That is, in fact, not necessary at all. What a waste. 26 says that, therefore, for the wise one, I would encourage you to contemplate. Do not generate arrogance and do not generate arrogance and do not create slander inside the Sangha. Try to protect your own speech. One should try to protect one's own speech. Try not to speak of any ill of others. Do not gossip behind others. Also, do not talk about if this monastic has pure precept and the other one doesn't have pure precept. Do not say that. Do not talk about, oh, this person's good and the other one's not good. This is pure and that is impure. This kind of comment commentaries, in fact, is not really proper either. According to the Dasabhumika Vipasha Shastra, it says that the Buddhist language as well as mind who can actually see the inner quality of a sentient being, in fact, is a very rare group of people. If one were to try to measure other people's inner realization, and then based on their appearance, and then generate that kind of contamination, that kind of arrogance and look down on others. In fact, this could lead to the birth of lower realms. This is quite, in fact, scary. According to the Dharmapada's precept, the sutra, where it says that, according to Pansukha Rinpoche, in fact, when Pansukha Rinpoche was given teaching on that, the Buddha was very stern, and he criticized the 60 bodhisattvas. Why is that? Because they didn't observe the precept. They didn't when they should be. They didn't listen to the Dharma when they should be. They didn't practice when they should be. It is because they slandered the Dharma in their previous lives. The 60 bhikshus either had jealousy or other afflictions to other people's practice and observing precepts. In fact, talking about other people's precepts and contemplation and so on it could lead to bad consequences. In the Tripitaka, there's a sutra, the Dharmapada Precept Sutra. There's another translation. It's called Sutra requested by Maitreya Bodhisattva. Pansukha Rinpoche taught on it. There were 60 bhikshus. I think he taught 4 to 6 classes. This text was included in the Tibetan language. I remember there was 4 translations available. The one I was talking about was translated back in Sui Dynasty. There are other editions available. If you have time, I think it would be the best to read the Tripitaka to develop a clear mind and clear perception. I know that many of you are quite busy, but if you have time, I think you should try your best to use that time to chant mantra or read books. The supervisors in different departments do not tell me excuses of that you cannot chant mantras or read books because you're too busy. This is not necessarily true. I think as long as the chanting mantra and reading books is not really influencing, it's not really disturbing you on your post, and then you should try your best to study, and then on the other hand you can volunteer, you can do other things and contemplate and study and so on. Sometimes I feel that there are people who are really good at working, volunteering, serving others, but there are people who can't do any. Anyhow, when you read into the sutra, in fact, I think they're quite supreme. When we first started to study, borrowing a book or on sutra or shastra is in fact quite difficult. But nowadays, to find a quote or to find a sutra is very easy, and everybody can do it. So compared to the previous times, now it's much more convenient.
太广了，对吧？
Okay.
在那就是若以恶言会
If one were to speak ill of the Shramana with ill words, then one would be born in the Nirvana and suffering greatly to be reborn from that hell realm. Even one were to be reborn from that hell realm, one would be born as mute, as blind and handicapped and so on. So the suffering in hell realm is immeasurable, but once you use the ill language to slander the Shramanas, slander the ordained, then you will be reborn in the hell realm. Even after you suffered all the karmic consequences in hell realm, you will then suffer the consequences of hungry ghost and then animal realm and so on. Then once, even after you gain the human body, again you will become handicapped, you will become deaf, blind and crippled and so on. Sometimes we see that there were beggars who's blind and deaf. This kind of situations in all countries. Of course, not Shramanas, but slandering the mundane beings. But over here, mainly it's on the mundane monastics. It's on the ordained monastics. Using ill language to slander others is in fact indeed quite horrifying. Online or in this world, sometimes it is because of the karma, just as in translator Anshigao's story, he didn't do anything bad to others, but there are people who just didn't like, he didn't like Shramanas at all. They would think, oh, this monks and this bald heads, and for no reason, then they would get angry because of that. Of course, everyone's karma is very different. It is all related to the karma. The 28th says that there are many kinds of foolish ones who talks so much about the monks and nuns ill, and then they would be reborn in the three lower realms and eventually suffer in this immeasurable ocean of suffering. Many people, in fact, are quite foolish, really inferior. They are not interested in the politics, in the economy, and so on, but they would like to say, oh, this nun looks so and so, or how she break her precepts and so on. Oh, look at that monk's mistake. So they always talk about other people's shortcomings and mistakes, and because of that, they would drown in the ocean of suffering of the three realms without any hope for liberation. In the sutras such as Vinaya Sutra, Udana Varga Sutra, and so on, there are so many stories about that, so I'm not going to be too elaborated on that. In fact, this kind of people would then later face great suffering, and even if they're fine in this lifetime, I think their next lifetime would be quite difficult for them. It will be with lots of suffering. Then 29th says that the great compassionate world-honored one whom would prostrate to the Sangha would respect and create harmony within the Sangha. All the Buddhas would do that. All the Buddhas are perfect in their realization and eradication of affliction. Then how about us, the mundane beings? How can we then have a sense of contempt towards the great Sangha? There's the story of how the Buddha would go to would go to the Sangha and take care of the ones who's ill and would prostrate to the Sangha and so on. Then for mundane beings, why are we so arrogant and contempt the Sangha? In the Vinaya Sutra, it says that the bhikshuni who was the aunt of the Buddha, and once she made a piece of clothing for the Buddha, but the Buddha did not accept it, however asked her to offer that piece of clothing that is made of golden thread to the Sangha. And the bhikshuni said, why? I show great kindness to you, but you don't accept my gift, but you asked me to offer it to the Sangha. And the Buddha replied by saying, the Sangha's merit is greater than mine. Even the Buddha pays such great respect to the Sangha, then who are we to contempt the Sangha? Pansuma Rinpoche also revered the Sangha a lot and said that we should not slander the Sangha and so on. I think many of you probably remember that. And then 30th says that there are the ones in this world who has great faith. They would revere and respect the Sangha of the world honored one. They once upon hearing the shortcomings of the three jewels, however, once they heard the shortcomings about the Sangha from others, they would generate wrong views. There are people in this world who has great faith to begin with, and they revere the Sangha, and they have great faith in the three jewels. But once they heard other people's language on slandering the Sangha, then they would generate wrong views. There are people who would say that, oh, I know them, don't go there. That's not a good practitioner. That is not a good practice center. I heard there are Sangha who broke their vows, and there's no contemplation and practice at all. The people there are all about the eight worldly dharma, and all the monastics are there for business. So there are people who are very eloquent in terms of creating negative karma. When asking them to talk about good things about others, they couldn't say anything. Or in Tibet we say it's like they have rocks in their mouth and can barely speak. So they mumble about other people's virtue, but when it comes to other people's shortcomings, they would get really eloquent. Oh, I know, I've seen that myself. And then right away they become very eloquent. If you were to ask those kind of people to recite the sutra, and if you ask them to memorize certain verses, they can't do that. But when it comes to talking about other people's shortcomings, all different kinds of metaphors and stories are so very vivid, just like the stories in the Lotus Sutra. They can talk about everything. In fact, this is in fact not good at all, because that could lead to other people's wrong view to the Sangha. This is not good for the Sangha, not good for the three jewels. So in this practice center or not, in fact, do not react based on other people's language. Seeing is believing. If you've never seen it yourself, do not believe in others very easily, because language can be very malleable. Language can be very easily manipulated. One should not believe in others very easily, otherwise you could destroy yourself as well as others. Whenever I heard people's discussion on the shortcomings and gossiping behind others, if it's not about the general management and so on, I usually don't make any comments. I wouldn't ask them, oh, so what happened? I wouldn't be very inquisitive about those gossips.
就下面这种人的话，就是因为僧众提谢见呢，就是因此呢，
because if one were to have wrong view towards the Sangha, then one would lose his or her faith, and then would slowly lose the virtuous roots and destroy the pure Sangha of the Tathagata. And for this reason, one will not be able to see the 1,000 Buddhas in the good kalpa. Because once you lose your faith, the faith that you that made you to believe in the three jewels to begin with, it could lead you to retrogress on the path or even give up. Therefore, even if we cannot propagate the genuine Dharma, do not generate wrong view for others because of your own action and language.
语言有点快了，就是那个呼口如皮是吧？是吧？漱口啊。
If we can do that, if we can keep our mouth shut.
是吧？这样可能比较好一点，对吧？
I think this is probably better. Therefore, as a wise one, you should contemplate, you should think about that often, because as a wise one, you should contemplate and maybe previously because of ignorance or because of lack of right mindfulness and right view, or on top of that, there's the affliction. Maybe you don't understand all of this. But from now onwards, you should restrain yourself from talking about the shortcomings of the Sangha. This is really, really important. Otherwise, destroying other people's virtuous roots, in fact, brings great difficulty and shortcoming for yourself. As we said earlier, destroying the stupa could lead yourself to be reborn in the three realms. But if you were to slander and other people would follow your slandering, the consequences would be much more dire. As Kagyupa's master would say that if I have a lock that could lock up my mouth and give the key to others, and I can only open up my mouth during eating, then that would be wonderful. At least I don't create any negative karma. Unlike that, there are practitioners who only refrain from speech when talking about other people's virtue, but shut up when but not talking about other people's virtue. So we'll stop here right now. Time's up.